Hello everyone, welcome back. So in this lecture we are going to learn about the MQReply node. So when talking about the MQReply node, as name suggests, it is used to send a reply back to the requester or reply back to the originator of the message. Okay. So if you want to send a reply back to the requester, then you can use the MQReply node, and this is especially used when you want to implement a solution in asynchronous flow. So you already know this, what is asynchronous and what is synchronous communication. So I just created a small diagram to explain you. Synchronous communication means a communication happening real time. Real time means as soon as a source will send a request, they need a immediate response, then it is called a synchronous communication. When the communication is not happening real time, then it is called asynchronous communication. Suppose when a source will send a request, they can wait for a time and they don't need an immediate response, then that is called the asynchronous communication. So when immediate response is required, then it is called synchronous communication. When immediate response is not expected, then it is called as a asynchronous communication. Okay. So to implement a solution in synchronous if you want to implement a solution in synchronous way, then we have a node called HTTP input node and HTTP reply node. So if you will use the HTTP input and HTTP reply node, then you can implement a solution of asynchronous communication where we can send a request and we will get a response immediately. But if you want to implement a solution that is asynchronous communication, then you can use the MQ input node and MQ reply node, where we will not expect an immediate response for the request. So in this lecture we are going to learn asynchronous communication with the help of MQ input and MQ reply node. Okay. So when talking about the MQ reply node is used to handle the reply to the message that was sent to the queue in IBM MQ system. So when someone is sending a request and if you want a reply back, then we use the MQ reply. So when a message is sent to the MQ, there may be a need to send a response back to requester, and MQ reply node facilitates this by sending a reply message to reply to queue specified by the original message. So whenever the requester will send a message, they basically specify the queue name where basically they want a response back, and mostly those queue is present under the MQMD properties of the message under the reply to queue option. Okay, so under the MQMD property we have a property called the reply to queue, where basically we want a reply message for the request. Okay, so whenever the source sent a message, they basically sent the queue name. They basically sent a queue name to which they basically expecting they expecting a response back for their request. When we are using the asynchronous communication, when we are implementing asynchronous communication of flow with the help of MQ input node and MQ reply node, when the source will send a message, they basically mention the queue name where they want the response for their request, and that queue name is present in that queue name they basically sent into the MQMD property. In MQMD property there is a property called reply to queue. and they basically mention the queue name there, and when response we will send, we send a response to that queue itself. Okay, and the node uses the replay to queue and replay to correlation id property from the incoming message to determine where to send message. So not only the replay to queue, for message we have the also called correlation id. So correlation id under the mqmd we have also a correlation id. Correlation id is also important when we want to send a response back to, because every message have some every request has some correlation id, and if we send a response with that correlation id, so it will be a in the proper sync up. Okay, MQReply node to send a response to the queue specified by the reply to queue of the header of the incoming message. Same thing it is saying here. So whatever the reply to queue mentioned under the MQMD header of the property of the incoming message, to that queue we will send a response. Okay, now let's directly implement the solution. Before that we have implemented a solution with the this flow. Okay, where we have used the MQ input, where we have used the error handling if in case of error happening, where we have used the compute node for the basic transformation, and where we have implemented MQ output for the sending message to output. Okay, okay, now let's consider situation. We have a this message. Okay, this is the bank detail. Under bank detail we have the customer name, account number, IFSC code, and the branch code. Okay, and we want this value to be inserted into database. We have created, I have created a table name. If you see, I have created table name. Currently there is 2 value present. Okay, I have created in, or let me just clear the value. Okay, so it will be from a scratch. Okay, so it is deleted. You can see currently there is no value present in table. Okay, so I want this value to insert into database. After inserting the database, I want a response as a data has successfully inserted into table. Okay, and that response I am expecting to send to the mass to the replay to queue mentioned into the header of the message. Okay, so how can we implement the solution? Just remove this because I don't need this MQ output, and instead of MQ output just use the MQReply node and just connect this. After that we want to insert data into database, so just mention the code what we want to insert. I have already written the code, just let me copy the information and paste here. Okay, so what I am doing here, I am just using the declare INREF reference to input root dot expensive dot bank detail. So I am creating a reference variable INREF which is pointing to bank detail. So with the help of INREF dot customer name we can fetch the value Risu Tiwari. With the help of INREF dot account number we can fetch the value this. With the help of INREF dot IFSC code we can fetch the IFSC code. With the help of INREF dot bank code we can fetch this value. Okay, now and we are inserting this value into the this column. So I am just doing the insert into the database dot table name. In bracket I am mentioning the column name, and against each column I am mentioning the value, and this value I am taking from the this input message. Okay, further I want to send the reply to queue. For that I need to, whatever the input property coming, I want to just send, I need to send it to output. So I can write like that MQMD equal to output root input root. Whatever the input property coming from the message, I'm just inheriting to output. Okay, that's the thing I'm doing. So whatever the source is sending in their message, whatever the message property, whatever the header property the source is sending in the message, I'm just sending to the output so that it will implement the solution. And further I want to do some hard coding value to for the response. So I can write some like that, set output root dot xml dot mq dot response equal to data has been inserted successfully to table is okay. That's simple thing I have written and it is okay. So what I am doing, I am first with the help of INREF I am declaring a reference variable. With the help of insert I am inserting this value into the database. Okay, further whatever the properties coming to input from the message, whatever the message property coming from whatever in the source application is sending, whatever the input properties is present under the input root.mqmd, I am just sending to output so that we have the reply to queue name present under the output root. And I am just hard coding the value under the output root or under xml.mq.response that data has been inserted successfully, and so that we can send some response to the queue that we have mentioned under the header of the reply to queue. Okay, so that's all happen. And as we are using the database node, so I just mention here the data source name. Now it is done. Now let's implement and test the flow. Before implementing the solution, I just want to take one more minute to explain what I am doing actually. Let me launch the debugger. I am using MQ input node. I am creating a similar flow that I have shown here. MQ input node and MQ reply node. So you can see I have the MQ input node and MQ reply node. With the help of MQ input node, I will send a request, and with the help of MQ reply node, we will send a response. So we are sending a request as this message to the MQ input. When it came here, it will goes to compute node. In compute node, we are inserting this value to the database, this database that I have created here. Further, after inserting, I want to send the message back to the requester, to where basically I want to send a message back to requester. That will be told by the requester itself. The requester will give me, when sending the message, when application will request a message to MQ input, they basically specify us the reply to queue name under the MQMD header, under the header where they basically want a response. Okay, so that property actually I am just sending to output. So I am just copying the information from the input root or MQMD. I am just sending to output, and further I am doing a hard coding to send a response back to the reply to queue. Okay, now let me hit the flow. Let me just copy the information. I have just taken this message as the input root. Under the MQMD, let me set the queue name as a queue manager name as a QM1, where basically I want to send the information, and where basically I want to send a reply. I want to send a reply to this queue response. So I want to send a response to this queue. So I will mention the here, and if you want to mention some key correlation ID, so you can mention also correlation ID, so that will be no problem. Okay, let me hit the flow. So what is happening here? Consider this RFC util is a source application. The source application is sending the input message. Apart from the input message, they are also mentioning the some header property. In header property, they basically are mentioning the reply to queue name, reply to queue measure name, and some correlation value. Okay, when this they are setting this value, what is happening? They basically saying that we need a response for my request, and we need a response to this queue, whatever the queue name we have mentioned under the mqnd reply to queue. So when we implement a solution like that, we basically get a response to the queue, we basically get a reply to the queue where to the queue name that we have mentioned under the mqmd reply to queue. Okay, so let me hit the flow now. Flow executed, it came here. If you see under the message, we have the property mqmd and the excellency. While sending a message, we have mentioned the reply to queue and queue manager name. If you see, we have the correlation id mentioned here. What same correlation id is showing here? We have the reply to queue mentioned here, and we have the reply to queue manager mentioned here, right? So when this will go to MQReply, MQReply will take this information. MQReply will take the reply to queue and reply to queue manager name, and it will send the response to this queue. So MQReply job is to copy the information. MQReply job is to take the information of the reply to queue and send the response to that queue. Okay, so with the help of MQReply, we basically send a reply or response to the queue that is present under the reply to queue. Okay, so let me move forward. It forwarded here and it has been inserted in database, but still it will not show because transaction is not completed. Now if I will further, if you see, currently there is no message under the reply to queue, right? There is no message under present. If I will further complete the flow, it is giving the error. Let's see what error is giving. Reply to queue name not specified. Okay, so let's see what's wrong error happening. Although I have specified the reply to queue name, but still it is giving the error. So let me see. Let me see where the wrong happening. It is saying the reply to queue name not specified, but although I have specified it. So let me check whether the wrong happening. Here everything okay. I have mentioned the queue name, parsing as XML, parsing option as a complete. Okay, that's fine. In reply to queue, we don't want to mention anything, so that is fine. And if you see in the reply to queue, we have a option called the transaction mode in similar way that we have seen into MQ input and MQ output. And if you see, we have option to of the inherit and content and value while in validation in similar way that we have seen to the MQ output. Okay, so these all things you can try. Okay, that's are not much important because these all things already I have covered. Let me see the compute node if anything I'm not doing wrong. I'm declaring INREF reference to this, correct? I am inserting to database. I am with the help of output root.mqmd. Okay, I have written the wrong here. Instead of mqmd, I have written mqmq. Okay, so that's the reason, that my mistake. Okay, now it's fine. Now it's correct. Now let's again build and test it the flow. So these are the small mistake you can do while doing the coding. So try to cross check the thing to avoid making the mistake. Okay, now flow has been, let me again hit the flow. You will see one data has been inserted because we have inserted earlier. Okay, now let me again hit the flow. You can see already the previous thing is showing. We have the queue manager name and the queue name and some correlation ID. Okay, let me hit the flow executed. It came here, and if you see in the under the MQMD, we have the replay to queue manager queue and replay to queue manager name and correlation ID some value. Okay, if I will go further into the compute node, I will declare the INREF insert into database, send the property to MQ output, and let's see this time it is showing or not. Under the output route, you can see under the output route it is now showing the replay to queue and the queue manager and correlation ID. These all values showing. So this a small mistake. Instead of MQMD, I have written the MQMQ, and that basically created the issue. Okay, so these all a small thing you need to take care while doing the implementation. Okay, now I will send the response back. In output route, I created a response to send a response. So this is sending, and this value I am sending as a response. Okay, let's complete the flow. And now let's browse the queue. So what is the queue name? Test 14 dot replay to queue. Okay, just 1 minute. Okay, this is the queue name, and you can see the same message. What actually this will be the response will be sent to the MQ input. Okay, and we will see the one data has been inserted in database also. You will see another row has been inserted, another row has been inserted. Okay, so in this way we have implemented the solution. So what we are basically doing, we are using the MQ input node to take the request from the source application. So we are taking this request as this value as a request for a source application. Okay, further I am taking this request with the help of compute node. I am inserting this data into database. Further, as the source is sending the replay to queue name into the header property, in the header property you can see source is specifying to which queue name they basically want a response or reply, and that queue present in which queue manager name. So with the help of that information, we will send a reply back to the requester, and once I will be sending a message that basically will go to input route, and input route having the under the MQMD we have the property that replay to queue and replay to queue manager. That property we will copy to the output route because we want this to the flow to the output. We want this information to flow to the MQReply, so that MQReply will check what is the value for the replay to queue and replay to queue manager. Once this will flow to here, so we are sending some hard coding value to the replay to queue. So we are sending two value. We are sending the MQMD property information, and we are sending the XML NSE information to this replay to queue. So whatever the information we are sending under the XML NSE, that will be given, that will be going to the replay to queue, and whatever the replay to queue name that we have mentioned under the MQMD property, to that queue MQReply will take and send a reply back to that queue. Okay, the MQReply takes the replay to queue information that is present under the MQMD and send a reply or response back to that queue. Okay, so that's all about the, let me again send one more time. So let me just modify some information, suppose, or without modifying, let me again hit the flow. So again executed the flow one more time. It came here, it inserted the value and sent to the queue. So if you will go to the queue, you will get the same information. That, let me just browse the latest message. You will see the same information, and you will see also one more row has been inserted here. You can see one more row has been inserted here. Okay, now in this way the reply node works. So reply node is used to send the response back to requester, and if MQReply node send the response to the queue name that we have specified under the MQMD into the reply to queue. So that's all about the reply to queue. So this is how basically we can implement a solution where we will send a request and we will get a response, and these all happening asynchronously. This is not happening in synchronous way, this is happening asynchronously. Okay, so that's all about. Let me again say what I am doing here. With the help of MQ input node, I am taking a request, I am inserting into database. Further, as source application is sending the information of reply to queue name and the queue manager name under the MQMD. So these all property I am just copying from input route and sending to output, so that it will flow through the out terminal of the compute node. And further I am just hard coding the value that the data has inserted successfully to the customer bank detail, and this value again following through the output node. So whatever the information will follow here, it will go to MQReply node. Further, MQReply will check what information basically we need to send to the output and what is the reply queue name. So to the reply queue name, it will basically send a reply, and what information it need to send, that information they will send. Okay, so if I will say MQReply node is used to send back response or reply back to the requester or originator of the message, and it will send a reply to the queue name that we have mentioned under the MQMD property of the and it will send a queue name that we have mentioned under the reply to queue under the MQMD property. So it will only send the information to the queue that we have mentioned under the reply to queue under the MQMD property of the message. There is another way. Suppose source will send that they will not able to send the information, they cannot send a, they will have not a capability to send the reply to queue, and they want us to implement it. Then we can do one thing also. We can hard code the information. Instead of writing this value, I can write like that. Instead of writing do like that, I can do something like that. I will write the here as a reply to queue, and I will mention the queue name here also. So that will also work. Okay, so let me mention the queue name. So, and before that, let me do one thing. Let me just copy the all information from the input output route. So it will be easy for me. Output route.mqmd equal to input route.mqmd. I'm not just copying the MQD information from the input, so that I can I am doing this because I can take the correlation ID, these all things from the input. Okay, so that's then I'm doing. This will also work. So let me deploy the solution. So if we mention especially in the code that what is should be the reply to queue name, then in that case source application do not need to send the reply to queue name. So in this way, let me just reload the message, new message. So just reloaded it, and you can see currently there is no reply to key name sending, there is no reply to queue sending, and still it will work. So I just sent a message. in MQ input, if you see under the MQMD, there is no reply to queue showing. Reply to queue is showing because it is taking by default as a QM1, but in the reply to queue it is not showing any value. Okay. Now further, if you will go inside the compute node, we are inserting database into further whatever the information present. Okay, it is giving error. It seems something okay. What wrong I am doing here every time here? Instead of mentioning writing the MQMD, I am every time I am writing the MQ. Okay, that's creating the issue. Okay, let me hit the flow. So you can see I am not sending any reply to queue from the input message. It came here. Go inside the compute node. Declare inref, insert in database. Whatever the property present in input, I just send to output. You can see under the output under the MQMD. Currently we don't have the reply to queue name. Now with the help of set command under the output route under the MQMD under the reply to queue, I will be setting this queue name. You can see I just setted the queue name using the set command, and I will be sending the response to the output, and we will see you can see data has been inserted successfully, and we will get the response also. So if you will see, we will see the response. Okay, so in this way, if source application is not sending a specific is mentioning the reply to queue name, then we can mention also with the help of hard coding or with the help of coding itself. Okay, so that's all about the reply to queue. So if I will again summarize the thing, reply to queue is used to send reply back to the requester. Okay, or response back to requester, and most of the case the source application or the requester is they send the queue name into the header where basically they want the response. They mostly send the queue name as a reply to queue. In reply to queue, basically they want to get as a response. Okay.